What if I told you that the name of Idaho, a state celebrated as the gem of the mountains, might have been born from nothing more than a clever lie? In the mid-1800s, America was racing westward, naming new territories, carving states into existence, and trying to give each one an identity that felt powerful, poetic, and permanent. Names carried weight. They were meant to honor culture, history, and the land itself. And then came a word that seemed to shine with mystery: Idaho. People were told it meant light on the mountains, a beautiful native origin story that captured hearts and imaginations. But here's the twist: no native language held that word. No ancient roots existed. It was a fabrication, a name that fooled a nation. And yet, against all odds, it stuck. So how does a made-up word transform into the identity of an entire state? When the name Idaho first appeared, it carried with it a sense of mystery and poetry. Americans were told it came from a Native American word, said to mean, gem of the mountains, or sometimes, light on the mountains. It sounded beautiful, timeless, and dignified, exactly the kind of name you'd expect for a rugged new land rising from the Rocky Mountains. In the 19th century, settlers and politicians were eager to attach a native origin to new places. It gave the land an instant sense of heritage, as if the soil itself whispered the name long before maps and borders existed. To a nation still writing its story, a native-sounding word was more than just a label, it was a claim to authenticity. Newspapers repeated the meaning, or what they believed the meaning to be. Speeches praised its poetic sound. People embraced the idea with little hesitation. After all, who would question a word that carried the weight of ancient tradition? But the truth is, no native people ever spoke the word Idaho. It did not exist in Shoshone, it did not exist in Apache, and it did not exist in any tribal language of the West. The name that sounded so ancient was not ancient at all. And behind this deception was a single man, whose invention of the word would unravel into one of the strangest naming stories in American history. The man at the center of this story was George M. Willing, a land speculator, a dreamer, and, as history would reveal, something of a trickster. In 1860, during discussions about naming what would become the Colorado Territory, Willing proposed a new and unusual word: Idaho. He claimed, with great confidence, that it was a Native American word meaning gem of the mountains. His pitch worked. Lawmakers, journalists, and citizens latched onto the name instantly. It was exotic, mysterious, and perfectly romantic for the booming American West. For a time, it seemed that Colorado itself would carry this name. Idaho appeared in print, circulated in political debates, and spread like wildfire in popular imagination. Towns were even named after it, eager to claim a piece of this supposed native heritage. But soon, doubts began to surface. Linguists, historians, and native leaders quietly pointed out a disturbing fact: no native language contained anything resembling Idaho. The word had no roots, no history, no foundation in indigenous culture at all. It was an invention. The revelation was damning. Colorado officials backed away, embarrassed by the exposure of a lie. The name was discarded from official discussions, and George Willing faded from the spotlight, his invention branded as little more than a clever fabrication. And yet, the word refused to die. Despite being exposed as a fraud, Idaho lingered in newspapers, on maps, and in the minds of settlers. It carried a strange power, an echo of poetry too compelling to forget. And just a few years later, when the United States carved out a brand new territory in the Pacific Northwest, officials reached for a name that was already on everyone's lips. By 1863, the map of the American West was changing once again. The discovery of gold, the surge of settlers, and the growing need for governance led Congress to carve a new territory from the rugged landscapes of the Pacific Northwest. Officials needed a name, something bold, something that carried a sense of wonder and permanence. And though Idaho had already been exposed as a fraud in Colorado, it had never truly disappeared. Newspapers continued to use it, frontier towns still bore the name, and in the popular imagination it remained alive. The word had taken on a life of its own. So when the time came to christen the new territory, lawmakers reached for a name the public already recognized. Idaho was officially chosen. A word born in deception, a word without roots in any native language, was written into law as the name of the Idaho Territory. From that moment forward, the fiction became fact. What had once been invented in the mind of a single man was now stamped on maps, echoed in congressional halls, and carried proudly by settlers who would soon call themselves Idahoans. And this is where the story takes its most remarkable turn, because over time, the people themselves gave the name meaning. They transformed it from an empty creation into a powerful symbol of identity. Once Idaho became official, the word was no longer just ink on a page. It became stitched into the fabric of daily life. People began introducing themselves as Idahoans. Towns, schools, newspapers, and businesses carried the name proudly. What had begun as a clever invention was now a living identity. And as years turned to decades, the meaning of Idaho deepened, not because of its false origin, but because of the people who wore it. Farmers breaking soil in the Snake River Valley. Miners chasing veins of silver and gold in the rugged mountains. Families building homes, enduring winters, and carving communities from wilderness. Each generation added weight to the name, turning it into something real. Soon, Idaho wasn't thought of as a questionable word with a shadowy past. It was the Gem State, a land of rich resources and stunning landscapes, defined by rivers, peaks, and the resilience of its people. The state motto, Esto Perpetua, let it be perpetual, captured the pride of a people determined to endure, no matter how uncertain their beginnings. And here lies the paradox. A name that started as an invention became inseparable from the culture it represented. Its power no longer came from supposed native roots, but from the lived experiences of those who embraced it. Which leads us to a deeper question: if a name born of imagination can gain truth through the lives of those who carry it, what does that tell us about how we, as humans, create meaning in the first place? The story of Idaho is more than just a curious footnote in American history. It's a reminder of how fragile, and yet how powerful, names can be. At its core, Idaho was nothing but a fabrication, a word with no roots, no tribe, no ancient meaning. And yet, through repetition, through belief, and through the lives of the people who adopted it, the name transformed into something enduring. It shows us how human beings have always built reality out of imagination. We give names, we tell stories, and in time, those stories shape identity, culture, and even destiny. What begins as myth can harden into history. What starts as invention can grow into truth. For Idaho, the name became more than a label. It became a vessel for pride, struggle, and belonging. The lie at its origin no longer mattered. What mattered was what people built around it, and the meaning they breathed into it across generations. And so, Idaho stands today as proof of a larger truth. Sometimes, it isn't the accuracy of a name that defines it, but the power we give it. But this raises a question worth asking. If an entire state can be built on a name invented out of thin air, what does that say about the other names and stories we've inherited? So now that you know the truth, that Idaho's name was never ancient, never native, but simply imagined, how does it change the way you see the state? Does it make Idaho feel less authentic, or does it make the story of its people even more remarkable, knowing they gave meaning to a word that began with none? History is full of names like this, words that carry secrets, half-truths, and legends woven into their origins. And Idaho is just one piece of that larger puzzle. If this story made you see Idaho in a new light, then just imagine what other hidden tales lie behind the names of the places you thought you knew. Tell me in the comments, should a name's origin matter, or is it the people who define it? And if you're ready to uncover more of these hidden stories, make sure you subscribe, because in our next episode, we'll dig into the surprising truth behind another state name you thought you understood.